If you look at pictures of Libya before and after the NATO bombing campaign in 2011, you might think that Libya was better off under Gaddafi. Look at this picture of Tripoli International Airport. This was it after the NATO intervention. It looked like a scene from a Hollywood action movie, right? But no, that's not a movie set. That's what NATO did to Libya. And this was just one building that they bombed. They also destroyed entire cities. In this video, we're going to tell you about 10 ways NATO destroyed Libya. Let's get started. Number 1, the economy. Before the war, Libya had a booming economy. It had one of the highest GDPs in Africa, around 75 billion US dollars. Its GDP per capita was around 12,000 US dollars. It had more than enough wealth to take care of its citizens. After the war, Libya's GDP collapsed. Today, it's just between 40 and 50 billion US dollars. Libya's GDP per capita is between 6,000 and 8,000 US dollars. Libya is poorer than Chad, Sudan, and Niger. It went from being one of the richest countries in Africa to one of the poorest countries in Africa. That's how bad the NATO intervention has been for Libya. But some people say that these figures don't mean anything because the GDP of many countries is inflated because they have so much oil. So let's talk about oil. Libya had one of the largest oil productions in Africa, producing 1.6 million barrels of oil per day in 2010. Today, their production is only around 1.2 million barrels of oil per day. Their economy depends heavily on foreign investment, but since the intervention, investors have lost all confidence in Libya. So there are very few foreign investors. All of this has led to massive unemployment. Before the intervention, the unemployment rate was between 10 and 13%, but today, it's estimated to be between 20 and 30%, and that figure is even higher among young people. Number 2, public debt. Before the Arab Spring, Libya had very little public debt. Their public debt to GDP ratio was between 3% and 5%. But after the NATO intervention, everything changed. Today, Libya's public debt to GDP ratio is well over 30. This means that they owe more than 30 of their total annual output to foreign creditors. To put that into perspective, Italy's public debt to GDP ratio is around 150. So, Libya's public debt to GDP ratio isn't quite as bad as Italy's, but considering Libya's economy is much smaller, it's actually worse. It's very likely that Libya will never be able to pay back this debt. Number 3, hyperinflation. Before the NATO intervention, Libya's inflation rate was very low, just between 2 and 4. But after the intervention, Libya experienced several episodes of hyperinflation. The Libyan dinar fell massively against the US dollar. In 2011, $1 US could buy you 2.6 Libyan dinars. But today, $1 US can buy you 4.9 Libyan dinars. Everything became more expensive after the NATO intervention. For ordinary people, this meant that they couldn't afford food, medicine, or basic goods. Number 4, the destruction of infrastructure. You may have heard about Gaddafi's extensive network of roads and highways. He built them during his reign, connecting cities and villages across the country. Well, those roads aren't as extensive anymore. During the civil war promoted by NATO, they were bombed and destroyed. And until today, no government has fixed them. Also, the war destroyed a lot of public buildings. Schools, hospitals, and administrative buildings were looted and destroyed during the intervention. Most of them haven't been rebuilt yet. But that's not the worst part. Since the war, Libya has suffered from frequent blackouts. Only 60 to 70% of Libyans have access to electricity. Those who do have access to electricity often experience frequent blackouts. And with insufficient maintenance, Libya's energy infrastructure will continue to deteriorate. Number 5, foreign reserves. Before the intervention, Libya had enormous foreign reserves. They accumulated wealth during the oil boom of the early 2000s. At the peak, their foreign reserves were around 150 billion US dollars. But after the intervention, their foreign reserves were depleted. Their oil wells were bombed and destroyed. Looters emptied the central bank of Libya of cash. And when oil production restarted, most of the revenue went to militias instead of the government. Since then, Libya has never recovered their foreign reserves. Number 6, healthcare. In 2010, Libya's life expectancy was around 74 years. That's actually pretty good considering that the average life expectancy in sub-Saharan Africa is 59 years. But after the NATO intervention, Libya's life expectancy fell to around 72 years. People stopped getting the proper medical treatment they needed. Medical services deteriorated. The war caused an increase in the infant mortality rate. Before the intervention, the infant mortality rate was 14 deaths for every 1,000 live births. But after the intervention, the infant mortality rate rose to 18 to 20 deaths for every 1,000 live births. So if your mother gave birth in Libya, chances are your brother or sister may not survive. Number 7, education. Before the war, Libya had a literacy rate of around 89%. That's very high for a country in North Africa. The literacy rate has remained stagnant since the war because the education system is still suffering from the aftermath of the war. There aren't enough schools or teachers. Many schools are damaged and haven't been repaired yet, and the ongoing conflict makes it difficult for children to attend school. No. 8. Internal displacement. Under Gaddafi, Libya wasn't perfect, but at least Libyans could travel freely within their own country. After the war, things got a lot worse. Hundreds of thousands of Libyans had to flee their homes. They've been trapped inside their own country. Until today, Libya has hundreds of thousands of internally displaced people. Number 9, security. Under Gaddafi, although the country wasn't democratic as West try to sell as a model, there was at least peace. There weren't any violent rebel groups or militias roaming the streets. After the war, Libya descended into chaos. Rival militias battled each other for control. There's almost no central authority left in the country. Libya is now controlled by militias and warlords. Each of them rules over their own territory. The whole country is fragmented. In fact, Libya is now split into 2 regions, the East and the West. These 2 regions often fight each other. It's almost impossible to travel between the 2 regions. Even aid organizations have a hard time delivering humanitarian aid. Sometimes they need military escorts to reach the people who need the aid. And number 10, human rights. Under Gaddafi, Libya had problems like all other countries targeted by imperialism to live. But after the NATO intervention, human rights got a lot worse. There were reports of war crimes committed by both sides, but mostly they were committed by NATO. NATO bombed civilian targets. They also used banned weapons, like cluster bombs. Then there are the militias. They commit horrible human rights abuses on a daily basis. There are reports of extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detentions, and torture. So if you live in Libya today, chances are you don't have any human rights. You can be arrested without trial and tortured by a militia. What about migration? Before the war, Libyans rarely migrated to other countries. But after the intervention, millions of Libyans started heading north to Europe. They fled their country because of the violence and instability. Today, Libya has one of the highest percentages of refugees and migrants per capita in the world. We hope that this video gives you a good idea of what the NATO intervention did to Libya. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when you allow foreign powers to intervene in your country. Some people say that NATO intervened in Libya to help the Libyan people, but in reality, they only helped themselves. They never cared about the Libyan people. And don't forget, like the video and subscribe the channel to keep thinking the world how it really is.